Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our fourth What the F session with Easy Equities. Tomorrow is our last one, and thanks to everybody who's joined us this week, and we hope you found it useful. Neil and I have certainly found it entertaining, and we love your questions, and the team that's answering them are learning a lot, so thanks very much for joining us. Good morning, Neil.
Good morning, Carl. How are you this morning?
Yeah, lekker, thank you. So what did your daughter tell you to buy yesterday? What was happening in the markets?
Well, it was coming lower, so she said, it's all red, don't touch it.
Smart. So to remind everybody, this week we've been talking about pricing, some of the challenges we have in terms of educating our users and ourselves on what's happening on the site. So just like to take a minute to remind everybody that our prices on the site are delayed by 15 minutes. That's common practice on many places, and that really is to ensure that we keep Easy Equities as a platform really accessible and cheap. So it's a 15-minute price delay. The second thing that I'd like to highlight is we spoke a little bit about when shares are suspended, why that happens, and there were a number of reasons. So a firm might be in business rescue like Comair, and there were a number of reasons when we would be suspending those. There's nothing wrong. It was a good we had lots of really good comments around that. And then, Elin, I'd like to bring you in when we speak about liquidity, which we did yesterday a little bit, and we had some excellent feedback. And thanks to Bob Norris and his son Sean, who are joining us from East London, and they're people from all over the country, so it's great. But people seem to be really interested in liquidity. And so I was wondering if you could maybe talk to us a little bit more about that, and how you actually buy and sell the shares that people, from an Easy Equities perspective, order, as it were, on a daily basis.
Sure. Yeah, I think, today's session will tie up a lot of the points that we've made and the themes that we've brought through, certainly, over the prior three sessions. So liquidity certainly being, an important concept, because once you've made the decisions, and for some people this can be quite daunting, but it need not be. But once you've made the decision as to the fact that you want to start investing, that's a hurdle that you get over. It's an emotional decision that you have to make. The steps that follow, are not always forthcoming. You need to then decide, okay, well, what do I invest in, and what suits me, and what do I want the outcomes to be? And part of that decision, certainly considerations whilst making that decision, has to be the fact that whatever it is that you decide to invest in, you need to have confidence that you can get out of as easily as you can get into. So, that kind of summarizes the requirement around liquidity. Liquidity, or certainly the lack thereof, manifests in a few ways. The most obvious being the ones we get most questioned on. I saw a certain price at 10 Rand, for example. Why did I buy it at 12 Rand? So what we're referring to there, and oftentimes we'll call it the spread. What we talk about what we refer to when we talk about the spread is the difference between the bid price in the market and the offer price in the market. On an
so Nick, I want to interrupt you there a little bit. So just to make sure I understand. So simplistically, liquidity is the availability of a particular share for me as a user to buy and sell, correct?
The quantum of shares available, correct.
So the amount that's available to buy and to sell.
Correct.
And then when you're now starting to talk about spread, you're telling us that certain people will offer a share at a price and others will want to sell it at a certain price, right?
Yes.
Okay, now tell us, how do we get the best price? We want some good thoughts from you on getting the best price.
Okay, so the point I want to make around the spread is that the more illiquid a share is, the wider that spread, the bigger the difference between where people want to buy and people want to sell.
Okay.
Right? And so
in terms of shares, the bigger the range between the buy and sell.
Correct. And that would kind of make sense, right? So when you look at the basket of shares in the top 40, which we consider the biggest listed companies, right, by market cap, those spreads on average are way inside of 1%. On average, it'd probably be 0.3, 0.4% in terms of the difference between the bid and offer. When you move out of that spectrum and you go to the shares that trade certainly less, in a day, and that's a way to measure it. What's the average turnover? So how many, not just how many trades there are, but how many shares actually trade on a particular stock. And if you think back, this kind of ties back to the limits that we spoke about. The one thing that frustrated you and some users as well was when I tried to do X number of shares or X value in Rand, you come back and tell me that, there's a limit and I'm trying to do more than that, and why am I restricted, etc. It's because exactly of that. We measure that concept of liquidity in the market by looking at the volatility of the share, i.e. how frequently the prices move, and then also what kind of turnover does a specific share have. A share that has low turnover will facilitate smaller trades then.
Great. So Neelan, I just want to make sure also that I'm understanding. You're not saying to me and users that we should only buy shares that are in the top 40, for example, so those that are highly liquid.
No, I'm absolutely not saying that. I'm just saying expect to understand that there's a bigger difference between the buying price and selling price on shares outside of the top 40. They may offer great value. There may be great opportunity in shares outside of the top 40. Oftentimes, certain companies are ignored, and that's why the liquidity is not there. But there could be, if once again, it ties in the concept of horizon that we spoke to. Are you investing or are you trading? If you're looking over the 3 years, well, if you're crossing a 2% bid-offer spread over 3 years, that's not a major train smash. Over one day, it might be.
Now, can you keep it easy again for people like me who don't like to work out percentages and other, I was going to swear, but I won't, other things like that. So if the price is 10 Rand on the ask and 12 Rand on the sell, is that a big spread in your language or a small spread? What is that quantum?
So correct. So that to me is a big spread. If it's 10 Rand on the bid side of the market, so that's where the best buyers are, and 12 Rand where the best sellers are, that's a 20% bid offer spread. Okay. So that is wide. You would want something much tighter than that.
Cool. So Neelan, let's talk a little bit about the top 40. So simplicity, those are the 40 shares in our stock exchange that has the highest, another term you taught us, market capitalization, correct?
Correct.
And that is evaluated every couple of months because obviously that changes. Now, the largest one I would imagine would still be Naspers, is that right?
Correct.
And then we would have the share that you mentioned in the quiz yesterday. Would that be in there? And maybe you can actually give us the answer.
No, the answer to that was Durban, Roodepoort Deep. I think my clue around the holiday destination threw everybody off. But
for Anglo and others.
So listed in 1895 and remains listed.
That's fantastic. So well done.
Yeah.
Involved in that brand. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So on the top 40, Neelan, is it fair to say that sort of 10% of this, or 10 shares would make up the vast chunk of that? And then you would have a range of other smaller shares, and maybe talk to us a little bit about some of those.
Yeah. So certainly, within that sort of index, if you like, there's a small number of companies that make up more than half of the total value of that index, and that's just because of the sheer size. When you talk the market cap of something like Naspers, it's north of R1 trillion. That is just enormous. And as you go deeper down the list, the market caps get smaller, obviously, but they'll take the top 42, actually, coincidentally, sometimes 41 in that top 40 index, measured by market cap, and that becomes, the future on that becomes a tradable index. So those are the most liquid shares. Naturally, you can expect that there's lots of international influence because most of those companies have external sources of revenue. Most of them are operating in foreign countries and earning in currency, earning in dollars, earning in euros, earning in sterling, etc. So there's obviously a currency component that comes into it when you're considering any of those shares as well. So I think, like yesterday's question to me from you was, what are some of the things I would consider, and what are some of the things that I watch, etc. And again, just for our users and our attendees, it's certainly not meant to be treated as advice or anything like that. These are just things. I mean, they are, as Carl mentioned, there are no golden rules. and there are no magical formulas that will always make it work. It's consistency more than anything else. But certainly when I wake up, the first thing I would do is look at what international markets have done. So the last thing I do when I go to bed is check how the US markets have closed, and the first thing I do is check how the Asian markets have opened and what's happened through their session. And that gives us guidance for what to expect through our market, because markets have become correlated over time. Globalization has led to that. You look at our top 40. I mean, they would say that up to 64% of revenue that's earned within top 40 comes from foreign sources. That's a big number. So you cannot ignore international market movements. They do influence the way we respond the following day. So that would be the first thing I'd look at, is just to kind of create the theme, then look through news headlines, have a check. I wonder if can I just swing my computer around and share a screen with you to show you that the
Sure.
format in which I look at it? I think users might find that.
And why Neelan's using his computer and not just sharing it on this screen is because, for those of you who don't know, Neelan's got many screens, so you can't just share one.
Yeah, sorry, and I'm using multiple PCs, so I don't know if that's clear at all. Looks like I've unplugged something. Yeah, in the process. But basically, so this screen, the screen, I don't know if it's on your right or left, but this one basically. So there are multiple things. This is a Bloomberg system that I use, right? So it's a highly sophisticated market information system. This is a summary of what I look at in the morning. So these are the futures that are trading around the world. So across the US.
What are futures? Relax. You see, you think everybody knows. Futures, what are they?
Okay. We'll talk about that in a sec. These are financial instruments that I'll define the future for you just now, right? Trading around the world across the
future for us. We can make some cash.
Yeah. So, well, basically, I mean, what we're seeing here is that across the States, Europe, and Asia, this is the percentage move on the day, and they're already down. I mean, in some parts of Asia, as much as 2.8% lower. Other things that I would look at, for example, this is a very nice page, which is a summary by country. So, what are our key rates? Where's prime at 7.75? Where's our currency trading? Where are our bonds, our government bonds? We spoke about that. Where are those things trading? It has news features and that you can filter out across the world, etc. So you can really fine tune what you want to look at on this. On this screen, this is basically where I execute easy equity trades. So this plugs directly into the JSE via another broker that we use, and I'm able to access market data and execute trades.
So how many trades do you do a day, Neelan? Just on that screen for easy equities and
yeah. So I actually looked. I looked last night, and from Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I did about 3,500 executions.
And would you be able to give us some kind of a rand value on that?
I would have a guess at around $250 million, 250 million to 300 million worth.
So that's phenomenal. I mean, I think it's worth, and I need to talk for just 30 seconds to help you calm down, because when Neelan looks at those screens, it's a near sexual moment. So he just needs a little. I want to remind the people that are with us today, normal easy equities users, that we've got hundreds of thousands of people in our community. And last month, we deposited about 800 million rand. And that's not because any one of us is depositing huge amounts of money. Most of us are depositing smaller amounts. And it just shows you the power of a collective and how powerful the easy equities community is. But you simplistically take our cash and you then, on that screen that you showed us on the left, buy what we want you to buy, correct?
Correct. So when clients on easy equities execute a trade, that trade, we discussed that process. So we will show you a 15-minute delayed price, but you will get filled at the live underlying price. What happens through that process in the background is that trade needs to go through a settlement process whereby we allocate those physical shares to your name as a beneficial owner.
So just to interrupt you there, Neelan, because I want to talk a little bit about security. So is my money safe? Are my shares safe? I mean, what happens if you run away? What happens if Easy Equities runs away?
So
Are
your
cash safe, folk?
Yeah, absolutely. Your cash and your assets all sit in a nominee structure. We don't have access to that. The shares are lodged in your name. Cash is off our balance sheet, but in a nominee structure. So all clients' cash is separate. Cash and assets are separate from the business.
And all of this, I would imagine, then is regulated by the Joburg Stock Exchange, by the FISCA, the regulator, and other
Correct.
law. And we are
Correct.
on
And yes, and there's regulatory requirements whereby we have to report, the values and the structure regularly, and also, our holding company is listed on the exchange, so we have to adhere to a whole lot of regulation around that. So there's tons of oversight in the system.
So Neelan, you were telling us you look at those screens, they inform what you do. Now, most of us aren't able to spend the time doing that. And some of us, like me, even if we did have the time, would not be clever enough to make sense of all of those figures. So is there if I want to say a summary, how do we make that easy for users to get that knowledge to assist them in the buying and selling of shares?
The access to information these days is incredible. I mean, you could be anywhere in the world on a mobile phone, on a tablet, on any mobile device with connectivity and have access to just about as much information as I would on my desk with the $25,000 Bloomberg machine, to be entirely honest. So Bloomberg...
Because we had a question, is the Bloomberg system free? Just repeat what the cost is.
Yes, it's $25,000 a quarter per terminal. So it's ridiculously expensive, yeah. And the various iterations. So the more you want to view and the more you want live access to, the more you got to pay. So every exchange that you plug into comes with a cost. But Bloomberg has an app, that you can download, and that is free, and you can follow markets on there, and you can read research on there. It's not live data, but that's fine. I mean, when you're investing, you don't really need live data.
And also people can go to that research.easyequities.co.za where we have a little bit of information. We talk about some of the technicals you mentioned, the fundamentals, and other information.
Yeah, and I'm going to bring that together just now because I want to share a screen, because I think some people just relate better to visually seeing a chart than understanding the fundamentals behind a company. But before that, let me just answer your earlier question as to what is a future. So a future is a derivative product. So it's a product that sits on top of an underlying asset. The underlying asset being, for example, an Anglo-American share. But let's say you and I, again, a distant memory, standing around a braai, I tell you, listen, Carl, Anglo's is trading at 100 Rand, and I think in about 3 months' time, I'll be ready to sell my shares. And I would like 120 Rand for them in 3 months' time. Do you think that's fair? And you say, well, yes, I like that because I think, and the only time you would buy that and agree to pay 120 Rand is because you think it's going to be 150 Rand in 3 months' time, right? So you and I have that agreement. A formalization of that agreement is basically a future where the seller agrees to deliver a certain asset at a predetermined price on a predetermined date. So 3 months' time comes, whether the share is 100 Rand or 500 Rand, you and I have an agreement that I've got to give you those shares and you've got to pay me 120 Rand. And that's a future, simplistically. Okay.
Neelan, I've got to keep us on track here because there's a lot to talk about. So you're going to share that screen.
Let me share a couple of
questions that we've got in terms of the most bought and sold shares. So Lesedi and some of the brand team regularly puts that information onto our social media. And we find it really useful to show what the Easy Equities users are buying and selling. And so check out the social media. I'm going to give Lesedi a bit of a hospital pass, but the oak's quick on his feet. I think, in the course of today, he can, or maybe we'll leave it until the end of the week. And then for the last WTF, we can share some information on the most bought and sold shares on the platform and check that out.
Okay, perfect. So let me just quickly share my screen so that So the first thing I wanted to show you, we were talking about firstly liquidity and then size of our exchange. So we appear here. So when I said we're in the top 20, we are just in the top 20. And by comparison, this is the New York Stock Exchange. So this is 23 point, and this is data for last year. So $23.12 trillion worth of turnover.
Sure.
Right. So we pale by comparison, but I mean, we're in the mix. We're not insignificant, was the point I wanted to make about this. I have never at Easy Equities received a query from users about the spread or illiquidity on any of the US stocks that we offer. So as users know, you can have a USD account and you can trade US listed stock as well. But this is the reason. I mean, because of that kind of liquidity that goes through all the time. Then I just quickly wanted to touch on, we spoke briefly in the week also about the difference between trading and investing, and being an active participant in the market or a passive participant in the market. This is our local index, the top 40, and this is a 5-year period from 2010 to 2015. This period would have treated passive investing remarkably well. Over this period, if you just persistently just bought, and if you had your monthly debit order or quarterly debit order, just always going into the market, over this period, you would have returned close on 100% by doing nothing, but literally just putting in money and buying, right? If we look at the following 5 years, this is what happened. So this is 2015 to now. This red line represents where we started and where we are now. You've actually made nothing. Some may argue that if you bring sort of inflation, etc., into it, but let's not complicate things, you're negative. But so there's been lots of volatility in between, and this period would have called for a more active strategy. Coincidentally, the cumulative sum of all these moves is a 260% move. So if I add this 22% up to the 17% down to that 17% up, 260% is what cumulative percentage moves sum to over this 5-year period. So quite a vast difference.
Maybe the interesting thing is that it again enforces that users must decide for themselves what they're wanting to do. There's no right or wrong answer. And the main job from the equities perspective is to give users as much information as they can. And for me, very importantly, make sure that all of us are comfortable to ask questions. I've learned in my involvement with Easy Equities and with investment is that there are very, very few people that actually know WTF is going on. And then there are about 3 of them, of which Neelan is one, that's actually nice about it as well. And so don't be embarrassed about asking questions, reading research, finding out. And I promise you, Easy Equities users, you know far more than you think you do, and you know far more than many of the experts out there. So read, check, ask, and decide for yourself what you're wanting to do.
Yeah, 100%. And Carl, you always remind participants to just check on the support section. There's a ton of information up there. Feel free to have a look at it. I mean, if there's stuff that's not there, make suggestions and we'll get it there. Like Carl always mentions, I mean, this is always about learning, and all of us are learning every single day. After 25 years of doing this, I learn stuff every single day.
Please show us your pretty face and kill the screen for a sec, please. And while you do that, I also want to say that you did lie one thing when you said you go to bed. You were implying that you go to sleep, but you don't. You sort of never sleep, which I find amazing. And thank goodness you've got a super smart and super nice wife and daughters. Otherwise, you'd be a sad, lonely geek, but they at least keep you grounded. So we've only got a couple more minutes left. I want to put you on the spot here, Neelan. One of our regular followers is a guy called Alexander Hilton. And again, we've got a whole range of sophistication and users. Some know very little like me, others know a lot like Alexander. But I think it would be useful, just as we tie things together, to explore one of his questions, which is around a listed share called African Rainbow Capital. And his question is, why is their price so low compared to the NAV of its stocks? And while you look that up, Neelan, because I thought maybe you could look at some of the information, Alexander's saying, maybe their recent purchases have solidified their position for the future. And he's talking a little bit about 5G investments, brands like Rain, people that are nervous about us getting cancer from 5G, etc. But maybe you can just talk to us a little bit about African Rainbow Capital and how you would use those clever screens to get some information around it, please.
Sure. So I'm calling it up as we speak. Just to actually just check the price action for starters. Check where it's trading. I mean, we've had a lot of activity in the stock, over the last sort of 3 or 4 months, and actually the introduction of tech brought this into the limelight, and obviously they're quite public figures that are involved in this business. Oftentimes when share prices or market caps don't reflect the underlying NAV of a business, people just don't have the confidence in that business.
And just a quick thing, NAV is net asset value, which means what?
Oh, sorry. Net asset value is, for example, a financial calculation of the actual net worth. So if you look at your NAV, it would be a net number, adding all your. It's positive. I know it's not negative. Looking at all your assets relative to all your liabilities, and you come to a value that your net worth is. That's what it means. It means net worth, right? So oftentimes, I mean, it reflects confidence in the share and the business. And quite frequently what we find, like if you look at a stock like Naspers, everybody was saying, but hang on, the value that Naspers held in Tencent is actually greater than the sum of it. And nobody could understand it. And so sometimes people discount certain forward cash flows. They apply more risk to those cash flows, and that could be the reason why something like African Rainbow Capital is behaving the way it is.
So just to try and for people that are less in the game here, like Alexander, like me, so I might say, looking at that information and hearing you, that I'm backing the management and strategy of African Rainbow Capital. I think that the share price is actually not reflective of what the business actually is. And I'm going to buy it because I think it's going to, in the future, better reflect that net asset value.
And that's the exact same process that users should go through. Do you trust the management team? Do you know a little bit about them? Have they done well in their past? What other boards do they belong to, etc.? Exactly.
Company invested in? Is it some stuff that I think people are going to use a lot? Or...
Exactly. And African Rainbow Capital is a holding company, right? So it's an investment vehicle, and they have a wide array of investments across healthcare, financial services, etc. So if any of those appeal to you, then absolutely. I mean, if you think it's too low, then buy some.
And again, I mean, I'm sad that we actually have to stop, because you as always do a great job, and there's the panel, the users are asking great questions, but we do have to stop. So just as a reminder, please head over to research.easyequities.co.za. For the free research. There's specific notes on companies that you've mentioned here. If there are companies that you want information on that you don't find, hit us up on social media. Check out our support portal for any questions, support.easyequities.co.za. And then Neelan, tomorrow, I think we're going to just change strategy, and tomorrow let's just answer questions. I think we'll do a 2-minute wrap up on pricing and related. And then we are going to just answer questions. And the aim of the game tomorrow is to ask questions that Neelan will not be able to answer. So bring all of them. Nothing is too difficult or too stupid. We're happy to answer everything. So bring your questions tomorrow. Those of you asking about if you need fancy software to trade US, absolutely not. You've got a USD account with your Easy Equities account. So head on over. You can use your rands to invest there, and the support portal talks about that as well. So Neelan, I'm sorry to cut you short. I know that this makes you very excited, and it is hell of an interesting. So thanks very much for sharing your terminal. and as it were, and we hope you have a good day. And thanks to the users. We'll see you tomorrow for the last WTF session. So thanks and goodbye.
Thank you very much, guys.